The next chapter for today then is the inhabitants of this world. So we have a general presentation of the inhabitants first, and it describes three different topics here: the kinds of sentient beings, their lifespans, and the causes for their birth. So first of all, the kinds of sentient beings, and it goes into a detailed list of 31 different kinds, but notes that they can be combined into three categories. So it lists the 31, and then at the bottom of the page says these 31 can be condensed into three existences of desire, form, and formless, or the three realms of desire, form, and formless, or the three levels below, on, and above the earth. So just slightly different ways of characterizing them, but we usually think of them as the three realms. At the top of 92, we have the lifespans, and the lifespan discussion is divided into 5 categories. We have the hell beings and nagas first, then the desire realm gods, form realm gods, formless realm gods, and other realms, kind of all lumped together here. So first, the lifespan of the hell beings and nagas. And so we have various beings in this category, that subcategories within those, and particularly the various hells. So we can have different ones, but they're either one short eon, or an intermediate eon, or a supreme eon, or a great eon, or as long as the world realm exists. So some general characteristics of that. The second are the desire realm gods. They live from 1 short eon to 6 short eons. And then we have the form realm gods, and those go from 16 eons to 1 short eon. And then we have on the next page the lifespan of the formless realm gods, and they can live from 1 to 4 great eons. And then we have this collection of other realms. So it mentions the humans, animals, and ghosts, and so forth. And it just says the Tantra is not clear about that. So again, we have the vagaries of this. And so how the very subtle breath is used for calculating the length of days is then also described here. So if we go on page 94, we discover in that top 2 paragraphs how we calculate the lengths of breaths, the lengths of an hour, of a day, of a month, and of a year, and a lifespan. Okay? Now sometimes they skip some of the subcategories there, but we start off, it says the human breath is divided into 21,600 parts, which I mentioned earlier in the course. One such part is the length of 1 breath of a fully formed insect. Okay, so if we divide all of those into the 21,600 parts, that's the breath of a fully formed insect. And then the 21,600 insect breaths is 1 of its days. 30 of those are a month, 12 of those are a year, 100 of those are the lifespan. Okay, then we have 30 human breaths equal to 1 breath of a ghost. And again, if we go through the sequence, we wind up with 100 of those as its lifespan. And then a human day is equal to 1 Ashura breath. And again, we go through all of that and wind up again with 100 of such years being the lifespan. And then we have the human breaths, the 21,600 that make up a day, and then 100 human years is the human lifespan. So it's very conveniently come up with fixed categories of how to divide and subdivide those. I'm quite sure that we don't all breathe exactly 21,600 breaths in a day. Depends a great deal on what else we're doing and how fast we're breathing and so forth. But it just gives a general idea of how those things might be fixed together. So again, I think it has more to do with symbolism than I think it has to do with literal interpretation. And then it goes on for a couple, 3 pages here with other examples, giving them in very similar kinds of formats. And then we finally get over to page 97, where it begins talking about a different category here called a group. This is down in the second paragraph on that page. And so it's talking about various forms of groupings of things together. We were talking about eons, so you can group those together in various categories in terms of eons and so forth. So here, talking about a group basically, although it uses some of our common language, a group here is basically something that is multiplied times itself. So if it starts off as 4, then the next level would be 4 times 4. If it started out at 5, the next level would be 5 times 5. So we multiply those things together. So by doing that, then the 100 years of a short eon is multiplied by 100. It's 100 years multiplied by 100 to make 1,000 short years, which is an intermediate eon. And then those are multiplied times itself to make 100 million eon, which gives us what they call a Mahakamkara, or one great eon. Okay, so going through several levels of multiplication, we get to these higher levels of this long period of time. And then it explains a little bit from some different sources of how they come to basically the same conclusion. And then on page 98, there is a fairly long quotation here where it starts off, the different names of the numbers are taught in Abhidharma. And so then it gives all of those names, and there are quite a few of those names included in here. And I think it winds up at a total of 51, 59, let's see, 60th, so 60 different names that are potentially included there, although again it's not entirely clear. Depends on which things are included or excluded among those. And then it goes on to another source that lists all of these names, and it gives a numerical list of 2 kinds. And it goes on for a page and a half listing all of these things. These are, categories of numbers of units. These are names of different units. And so this one comes up with, again, varying numbers. There's 116, there's 136, and so forth. But then it finally gets to the next topic, which is causes for their birth. So they're talking about beings, different forms of beings here. So great non-virtuous actions create birth in hell. So really serious non-virtuous kinds of things, you're violating some of the more serious kinds of things, like causing a Buddha to bleed or killing your mother or father, or those kinds of things. Middling non-virtuous actions result in birth as a ghost. This would be a hungry ghost. And then small non-virtuous actions bring about birth as an animal. Then there's a phrase here that it throws in, no pun intended, virtuous throwing karma. Throwing karma. Throwing. Okay? So it's virtuous. The phrase throwing isn't exactly clear here. And it's also karma. So virtuous throwing karma together with powerful completing karma are giving of giving are causes for birth as an Ashura, or demigod, jealous god, so forth. Virtuous throwing karma alongside either virtuous or non-virtuous completing karma, so it doesn't seem to matter, results in birth as a human. Okay, so some virtuous karma there. Virtuous throwing karma coupled with the completing karma of powerful acts of giving, together with the force of mantra recitation, results in birth of a god as a god in the desire realm. Virtuous throwing karma with virtuous completing karma will bring about birth in the world of Nagas. Birth in any of the 16 realms of form requires a meditative absorption vow that has discarded the 10 non-virtuous actions. So we have that list of 10 non-virtuous actions and to avoid and 10 virtuous actions to engage in. So in this case, you have to have made the vow to discard the 10 non-virtuous actions, plus throwing karma consisting of individual preparatory meditative equipoise for each of the 16 realms. So in the God realms, it's described as you have to go through all 16 stages in order to work up through those. And so there are specific things that are required. It's a little bit like the 10 bhumis, if you're not familiar with the God realms, because we don't really talk about those very much. Where you've got different stages of development that you go through and specific practices that are associated with each of the bhumis and so forth. So this is for the 16 realms and a completing karma in the form of meditative equipoise of the actual absorption for each of the 16. So you have to have mastered each of those 16 realms in order for that. And similarly for the formless realms, it doesn't spell those all out, but you get the general idea here. And then it also goes through from the great commentary and some other sources here, and it talks about other possible combinations. So in spite of the fact that it gave us a specific list in this case, it also says, hedges its bets a little bit and says, well, there are some other ways that this can be viewed. Okay? But we won't go through all of those. So continuing then on page 102, it talks here a little bit about extinctions of the elements. And it mentions here in the second paragraph the throwing and completing meditative equipoises that were referenced in the section we just talked about. And the extinctions, what we were talking about is extinctions of the elements, fire, air, space specifically. And it says then in the next paragraph, what is the purpose of this? And then down a few lines in Kalachakra, all phenomena are ascertained by their being in the nature of the 5 elements. And then also the form realms are understood as being primarily the elements of earth, water, fire, and air, respectively. The formless realms, then, are to be understood as being of the element of space, just alone. Okay, so the 5th element, which is space. And actually, earlier in the description, it included a separate element called gnosis, and that one's not included when it talks about the various elements as elements per se. So at the paragraph right before the quotation here, it says the seed elements that produce the 31 realms, so this is including all of the desire, form, and formless realms, of 31 total, are mentioned in the realms chapter, and then it goes through and it lists all of those with no descriptions or anything, but in that last paragraph, in the quotation and last paragraph, it just lists what all of those are as a part of that. So giving us just a little bit of an introduction to that we will talk about later on. So that concludes the other chapter about which we are speaking today.